Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today we're Masechtas Avodah Zarah Daf Nun Beis. We're going to begin on Nun Aleph Amud Beis by the Mishnah. Says the Masnisin, Avodas Kachavim Shahayoloi Gina Omerchatz. Let's say you have an idol worshiper that has things that perhaps you would enjoy, for example, a garden or a bathhouse, and you would like to go to their merchatz. So the din is nehen and mehen, shelo b'tova. You are allowed to go into this bathhouse, provided that you do not have to pay anything, if it's for free. It says Rashi, shelo yalu sechar l'karmen. You don't have to pay any payment to literally the priests, but it means the attendees, the people that work there. Then it would be okay, because no one's getting hana, the fact that you went there. However, ein nehen and mehen b'toiva, you're not allowed to go in the event that you do have to pay, because obviously then they're getting hana from you. Then the Mishnah says, let's say that this garden belongs not just to the Ovid Kachavim, but also to someone else who is not an Ovid Kachavim. So it's like a shutvis, it's a partnership. Then nehen mehen ben b'tayva ben shelo b'tayva. In that situation, you could even pay, because not necessarily is that money going to the Ovid Kachavim, it could be going to the partner. And then the Mishnah concludes, Avodas Kachavim shel Ovid Kachavim asur miyad, which we'll discuss this a lot. When it comes to the idols of an idol worshiper, that becomes asur immediately. Apparently, even if they didn't even start worshiping it. However, shel Yisrael in asur ad shete'avad. However, if you have a Jew that made an idol, if it hasn't been actually used in its service, then it's not usher yet. And with this, we continue the Gemara. Rabbi. So b'toiva is karmen. When it says with pay, it means paying these workers in the bathhouse, for example. Shelo b'toiva is karmen. It means that you don't pay these workers. So that's kind of what we established, and that seems pretty obvious from our Mishnah. So in this, the Gemara says, Lafuki, that comes to exclude Toivas Oivdeha Deshari. In other words, the attendance of the Avodah Zarah, the one who is actually, let's say, giving, for example, a tip to the towel boy, for example, like that is allowed. Because even though you can't pay the ones who actually are involved in the Avodah Zarah, but if all you're doing is giving money to the attendants of the Avodah Zarah, then it's okay. So again, there's a difference between the Kaimrim, which seem like the people who actually are the idol worshippers themselves, the priests, and those people who are just working in the bathhouse, who really don't apparently care so much about idols. They're just doing a job. So in that situation, that's the din. In that case, Abai says the shori. Ikadamasti la seifa. Some say it based on the second part of the Mishnah. Let's say you have a partner who's a non-idol worshiper. Nehen and mehen b'tayva b'shlo b'tayva. So then you are allowed to use that bathhouse even if you do pay. And on this, I'm Rabbi b'tayva sacherim, shlo b'tayva kaimim. So when it says that you can do this even if you're paying, that means if you're paying the other guy. Shlo b'tayva, when you don't pay, is shlo b'tayva kaimim, that you don't have to pay the priests. So man namasni seifa kol shekin aresha. So the one who just learned the seifa, so then certainly when it comes to the ratio which is totally owned by the person who worships idols. But based on the ratio, the seifa, you would say that no, that since there's a partner that's with you, then you would think you could maybe even pay the toivas kairman. You could even pay the priest as well, technically, since it's not totally owned by the Avodah Zarah. So basically, the question is between these two different Lashonos is, do we say that if there's a partner that you could even pay Tavis Kaimer? Okay, let's look in Rashi. Koshkin Areshit Givan de Kul and the Avodah Kachavim also lost a Sechar. Okay. And then the Gemara said, so we're going to spend a decent amount of time discussing whether or not this is, in fact, the opinion of everyone, that an idol worshiper who is an Oved Kachavim, who's not Jewish, so that person, according to the Mishnah, as soon as it is made, it's immediately usher. Mashen Ken Yisrael, it's only when it's actually served. So Masnis Sinmani, Rabbi Kivihi. Our Mishnah is like Rabbi Kiv, the Sanya. The pasuk says Avid Tavedun Neskol Mekaimais. So this pasuk in Devarim, the Abid Ta'abdun Neskol Mekaimais Asher Avdu Sham Hagoyim. They have to basically destroy all these places in which these nations made idols, etc. Es Elohehem, Al Haharim. You have to destroy their idols that are on the mountains, that are above, and Vahagavois or Sachas Kalitz Ranan, wherever it is, if it's under a tree, you have to get rid of it. Now, it's interesting, it says the word Kolam and Komos in all places, and it also says Asher Avdu Sham Hagoyim, which is mashma maybe that it's only when they actually worship it. So on this, the Gemara interprets. This pasuk is referring to the kalim in which the idol worshippers used. So therefore, those kalim need to be destroyed. So yachol osum v'lo gamrum. You would think, let's say they made the kalim, even if they had the wrong intentions, but it was not actually completed, or gomrum, let's say the kli was finished, v'lo havium, but they didn't actually bring it to the Avodah Zarah, havium v'lo nishtamshu mahen, let's say it was even brought up, but it was not actually used, yachli hu asurin talmud lema asher avdu shama goyim. Shein oisrin ad sheyavdu. The pasuk seems clear, it's only once it was actually used. Mekan omru. From here we can derive that, and this of course is not like our Mishnah, because this is not Rabbi Kiv, it's going to be Rabbi Shmuel, that he says that that when it comes to a kli, and it seems clear from the pasuk, like the shita, that when it comes to an akum, it's only asher avdu sham. However, we can make the diuk v'shel Yisrael sur miyad. That's only by Avodah Kachavim, but a Yid who makes Avodah Kachavim, when you make an idol, it's usher immediately, even before use. Rabbi Shmuel. However, our Mishnah is like Rabbi Kiva Omer, Chiluf Hadavar, and flip it. Avodah Kachavim, Shel Avodah Kachavim, L'Sur Miyad, V'Shel Yisrael Ad Shetalvad. So again, which is like our Mishnah. Omer Mar. So we quoted that this pasuk of Abid Ta'abdun is referring to the destruction of the kalim that were used for the idol worship. So understand, it says places. It doesn't talk about kalim. It talks about the physical locations. So how could you interpret this pasuk to be referring to kalim? So it can't be talking about places. Even though you're right, it does says kol kaimais, but it can't be referring to that, because we know already the little mystery that the whole Isser is only the idols that are on the mountains. The mountains themselves cannot become usser. So you can't usser a physical place. As we continue to Nun Beis Amud Aleph, therefore it must be to Nu Inyan L'Kalim. Therefore, this is the source that when it comes to the kalim, those which are used in the service of Avodah Zarah in those locations, that's what's us. Mekan Omer, but it's as we said, only once it's used because of the pasuk according to Shmuel. Shel Yisrael miyad. I b'habi kalim okimnala. Understand, we're talking about the kalim, not the Avodah Zarah itself. So why is it all of a sudden say Mekan Omru? We can learn out from here when it comes to the idols. This is not talking about the idols, this is talking about the kalim. So Omakra, so because the pasuk also says Asher, which is the same pasuk, Asher atem yarshim oisam es Elohehim Eloharim. So why does it say that? Again, you have to basically get rid of their idols, and it says the word es. So makish Elohehim l'kalim. We make a hekesh. Ma kelim ad shiavdu, af Eloheim nami ad shiavdu. That's how Rabbi Shmuel learns it. He learns out of Hekesh, and therefore he says the fact that it says Asher atem yorshim es Eloheim, so therefore it's coming to include also the idols themselves. Rabbi Kiva, Dol Makish, who doesn't make this Hekesh, Armocha es is actually Hifsik Inyan. Actually, no. The word es is not like a riboy, pomfakert, and maybe that's not how Rabbi Shmuel learns it. He just learns it as a Hekesh. He says the word es is actually a hefsek. It splits everything to show you that it's not the same. Rabbi Shmuel Asher. So in other words, it sounds like Rabbi Akiva doesn't disagree. Maybe when it comes to Kalim, the whole machlokas is when it comes to the idols themselves. Rabbi Shmuel Asher Chanavas Chachavim Shalav Chachavim De'ein Oy Asura Ad Shitavad. Okay. However, we understand the machlokas, which sounds more logical. We understand Rabbi Shmuel's sheet. Rabbi Shmuel says, the pasuk says regarding the kalim, and he makes a hekesh to the idols themselves, that it's only once you actually worship it. That's by an Ov Kachavim. However, that's not the case when it comes to Yisrael. Yisrael, the Asur Miyad Minole. How do we know that when it comes to a Yid, that it's Asur immediately? So it's actually it's logical. Mid Oivid Kachavim Achitavid Yisrael Asur Miyad. So it's just based on, again, like a diak in the pasuk. The pasuk tells us when it comes to an akum, it's only once it's actually worshipped. So it must be when it comes to Yisrael, it's immediate, and that's how Rabbi Shmuel understands it. So Eima Yisrael Kalal Kalal Lo. No, maybe the diak should be the other way around and say maybe on Yisrael who makes idols. Not only is it not usher when it's made, even after it's worshipped. Gemara says that can't be, because Hashgad needs a boy. We know it has to be basically buried and destroyed. So why? So you're telling me it's suri lo mitzvah? It's not aser? Obviously, the fact that it has to be destroyed, as we're going to see, as it says, v'sham b'seiser, you have to conceal it. Obviously, it's something which is aser b'hana. So therefore, you can't say it's always mutter. So therefore, now you have to go on the other side and say it becomes usher immediately once it was made. The aim kachavim. Why do we just say it has the same din as an akam? No, Omikra, because the pasuk says, which is in also in Sefer Devarim but Perik Tes, it says this chataschem asher asisem, the sin that you did regarding the egel, which is of course the Jewish people worshipping the Egel Hazav. L'kachti, I have taken the Esref Oiso and I've burnt it up. Keish, the Ekois Oiso Tochlin Hetev. So he ground it up very, very well until it was like earth, like dirt. And then he took it and he threw it El Nahanachal Hayiri Minahar. He threw its remains into the river. So what do we see? The pasuk says, "Asher asisem." That's the egel. You made the egel. So we see mishasasiya kam lebechet. It's already considered to be a sin immediately when you made it, not just when you worshipped it. It's the fact that you made it, and therefore, because of that, we can learn out from the pasuk explicitly mentions regarding the egel hazav, which obviously is a Jew who made it, that the din is it's usher immediately. So ema hachinam hanimili will make him gaver bechet. Maybe that just means that the Jewish person did a sin, but it's sturi l'mitzvah. That doesn't mean that the thing itself becomes usher. So Amar Kra. So on this, the pasuk says also in Devarim, Or ha'ish asher yasa pesel umasecha. Anyone who makes an idol. So again, we see mishasa siya. Kama ba'ar, you get cursed. So again, Emahani Mili will make him Gabra ba'ar. Maybe you'll get cursed just by making it. But how do we know that is sturi lo mitzvah? Maybe it's not usher yet. So Toevas Hashem ksiv. The pasuk over there also says it's Toavas Hashem. It's an abomination. So what is that? How does that help us? So it's considered, obviously, why would it be a toeva? Because it's usher, right? Something which is abominable. It's something which is usher. He says it's something which will bring you toward toeva. once it's actually served, but not necessarily right when you make it. So that's the back and forth regarding this this machlokas. Okay. Rabbi Kiva, so again, Rabbi Kiva, who is like our Mishnah, so, and he again says, when it comes to an akum, it's only once it's actually served. When it comes to a yid, it's even right away once made. Okay, that's let me say that again. According to our Mishnah, Rabbi Kiva, which is in accordance to Rabbi Kiva, he says that it's us when akum is usher right away. However, for a yid, it's only once it's served. I don't think I said it that way, but that's Rabbi Kiva Shita, which is like our Mishnah. So Rabbi Kiva, avodas chachamim di asur miyad benoli. So how does he know that it becomes asur right away? I understand. Okay, so how does he know? So Amar Kra, because the pasuk says in also Sefer Devarim, Perek Zayin, Pesile Elohehem Tisruvim be'esh. You have to burn this up with fire. So what do we say? And we went out, Mishipaslu Nasa Eloha. Once it was carved out, then it becomes already as a idol, which means you didn't actually worship it yet. All you did was carve it out, and just by carving it out, that's already makes it usher for a yid. Okay. For an akum, pardon me. So again, this is a pasuk referring to the chachavim. It's usher right away because this is referring to their idols, and they have to be destroyed from the time that they're carved out. The idach hahuma boy. So the idach, according to Rabbi Shmuel, who says that by an akum, it's only usher once they worship it. Hahuma boy lekatanu Rabbi Yosef. Tanu Rabbi Yosef and nanu chachamim shepoisel Eloha. How do we know that an akum has the capacity to pasel, or in what we're going to learn that as can be mavatel their idol? Shnemer pasil Elohim tisron be'esh. So that's what we learn now. V'idach. How do we know? How does Rabbi Kiva know that they're able to be mavatel their idols and they become mutter? So v'idach nafalei mid Shmuel. The Shmuel Ram, he asks a contradiction in psukim. Ksiv, on one hand, the pasuk says, it tells us that when it comes to their idols, you should not desire the silver and gold which is upon them, and basically they have to be destroyed. And yet it says you shall take it. So haketzad. So are you allowed to take their gold and silver or not? If it was made for idols. So pasul eloha losachloid. It was carved out for Avodah Zarah, then you're right. In that situation, you can't use it because it's an Avodah Zarah. However, paslu meloha v'lokachtocha. If it was by invalidating it, then all of a sudden you can take it. So as long as it became batel, then you actually could take it because it's not connected to Avodah Zarah anymore. At least the akamim batel. Rabbi Kiva ashkechan v'chachavim shal v'chachavim de'asur miyad. So Rabbi Kiva, we just established that when it comes to akum, that it's asur immediately because the pasuk of Pesili Elohehem. So the Israel to avad benol. And how do we know, according to Rabbi Kiva, which again is also our Mishnah, that when a yid makes it, it's considered to be asur only once it's actually worshipped. So Rabbi Yehuda Merkra, because the pasuk says regarding the cursing, or ish. Curses a person who makes these idols, an abomination, and then it says v'sam b'saser, and it says it shall be in concealed. So we see ad sheyasel devarim shebeseser, until you actually did this type of service. So in other words, you actually do a chet of Avodah Zarah in private, which is typically how a person would worship. So in that case, the Beis Din won't know, and you won't get punished. That's the whole idea of why it was done b'seiser, so that no one would know. So Rashi says, when it comes to idol worship, that's done privately, shelo yishmu Beis Din v'yiskaluhu, so that Beis Din will not hear and will not stone you. But again, we see from here that it says that it was done in private, which means it's only when a yid actually serves the idol that's when it becomes aser. How does Rabbi Shmuel interpret this pasuk? Because according to him, he says the Yisrael who makes an idol, it becomes aser immediately upon making. How do Rabbi we know you have to bury it, destroy it? It has to be concealed. The idach, how do we know geniza? Rabbi Kiva. So nafkalim Rav Chisda Omer Rav. The Omer Rav Chisda Omer Rav. Menan levados chachamim shel Yisrael shetuna geniza. How do you know it has to be buried and destroyed? Shnemar, because the pasuk says, regarding the Asherah tree, it says Asherah, that you're not allowed to plant a tree. Kol eitz el mizbach Hashem elkecha, any tree next to the altar. Just like the mizbach or mizbech to geniza, it needs geniza because it's considered, as Rashi says, the ha'asr b'hana, because this is mamish used for the Avodah Zarah, so that needs to be destroyed and buried. Af asherah te'una geniza v'idach. So what do we do? What does Rabbi Kiva do with this pasuk? Tahuma boile, look at the Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish, kol ha'maimid dayin shenu hogun. If you have a judge who is not proper, kil neito asher Yisrael. It's kil like you planted a tree, an idol worshiper tree. Shenamar shaytim v'shaytim tidla chal b'chol sharecha. So we have the pasuk shaytim v'shaytim. V'samachol will see docha asher kol eitz. Tomar Avashi v'makoim. How does he know that? Okay, we just stop there. Rav Ashi v'makoim talmidei chachamim, in a place where there are talmidei chachamim, and you point to that guy, it's ki'ilu natu eitzel mizbach, shnemer eitzel mizbach. It's like the Asherah tree which is placed by a holier thing. A mizbech is like a talmid chacham. Okay, that's how it's being compared to. Anyway, all right. Let's hold off for 1 second and let's see question 9. Question 9. Pesile Elohehen Tisun Be'esh Losachmoy Lokachtamcha. Elibed Rabbi Kiva, Pesile, when it says the Pesil Elohehem, at the serving of this idol, so Misparish betray Afni, Chad Le'isa v'Chad Le'heter. Mehem hapirushim to Pesil Elohehem, Mehem hadinim ha'oilim b'mikrazeh. So it's possible that the lashon peace is the lashon of peaceful. Right? We learn out that when it comes to to the idols of an akum is usher even before it's actually worshipped, just as long as they made it. Or it can be a lashon of psoiles, like leftovers. The akum poisel elohal mutter. That's something which is like leftovers, like worthless. Like an akum has the ability to be mavatal their item. So boy Rav Hamnuna. So Rav Hamnuna poses the following question. Let's say you have a broken kli, and it says Rashi kli shenishbar, and then it gets fixed up. So what is the din? So kli mahu avodas chavim deman. So 1 second, what are we talking about? What type of idol? Who's engaged in this idol worship with this broken kli that was fixed? If we're referring to the idols of an akum, to Bein Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Kiva, according to either of those opinions, these are considered to be utensils of the akum, of the idols. They all hold when it comes to the kalim, it's only until you actually use the kalim. That's what we saw on the previous daf, that it says this pasuk asher ovdu sham hagoyim, and that's referring to the kalim. The question is, does that also apply to the idols? That was the whole question to make a hekesh. That's the machlokas Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel. But when it comes to the kalim, until it's actually used, there shouldn't be a machlokas. A question. We're talking about, it's the idol worship of a yid, and he's the one who fashioned and fixed it. So, Elibadaman. Rabbi Kiva, when it comes to the sheet of Rabbi Kiva, again, who is the author of our Mishnah, that he holds that when it comes to Yisrael, it's not usher, the idols themselves are not usher when you make them, it's only when you actually worship them. Now, hashta. He gufa le mystery Shita avad. Rabbi Kiva holds that the idol itself isn't usher until you actually worship it. Misham shema boy, its actual kalim, of course not. Right? The Ella libder mishmuel. Dear Masur miyad. Now, Shmuel says that the idol itself becomes usher immediately, just by making it. So, what's the deal when it comes to these broken kalim that are fixed? Misham shemin, Misham shemin, mimashmashin gamrinan. Do we learn out the kalim from the Israel to the kalim from the Akum? Ma hasam ad shi'abdu. It's until it's actually worshipped. Av hacha ad shi'abdu. O dilma mina gomer. Ma hi asur miyad. Just like the Avodah Zarah is asur immediately. Av misham shemeha asur miyad. So the question is, do we compare it to the Avodah Zarah itself, which is asur immediately? Okay, so my area to come boile risuch kli. So tiboile asa. Understand, why is it talking about that it was broken and fixed? Talk about that you actually made the kli. Rav Hamnuna mishum tuma yishtek boile. The reason why it's talking about it was broken and fixed has to do with tuma yishana. Has to do with like old tuma. Right. So again, why use the example of a broken kli that you fixed? So that not kli matechas. If let's say you have a metal kli, so pishutehen, when it's flattened out, umikablein tuma tamein nishbru tahur. It can be mikabel tuma, but once it's broken, it becomes tahar. That's the din. However, so therefore you could think, well, if something is tameh, the Gemara discusses this elsewhere, just smash it and then like refashion it, and then all of a sudden it becomes tahar. So chazav yasin kalim yasel tuma yeshana. And what we ended up doing is, like you said, no, that doesn't make sense, because people are never going to be wait or bring it to a mikveh. They're just going to break it, and maybe they won't actually break it properly, and therefore they'll fix it quickly, and that's not good enough. So says Rashi, the tzricha tefillah, we require that even though it was broken and refashioned, that it needs to go to the mikveh of Yatziyas, and we learn this in Masechta Shabbos. The first time it goes to Shema Yomer Tefillah Bas Yoma Oila, because people will think that you can even be toivel a kli which is a bas yoma. With the first 24 hours, it still has tam ki'ikr, and therefore you have to wait. The kamaboile kli shenishtamshu b'avodas chachavim. When it comes to a kli which is used for Avodah Zarah, they're going to mistake the Shabbos misham shmei tameya. So we learn in Parak Rabbi Kiva that the service of it is tameh. Shavrin, if you break it, kedil taran b'chazer the riskon lavas chachavim, but you fashion it and fix it, v'dayin lo nishtamshu bo, but wasn't yet used, mi hader l'tumah kamaiso lo. Does it take upon itself its original tumah? So when it comes to the tumah, what we place upon the kalim of avodas chachavim, if it's broken and fixed, do we say the same din like a tamei keli that's broken and fixed, that it has to still need the mikveh? Ki hadra tuma, when the tuma comes back, tuma deraisa. Maybe we are strict when it comes to tuma, which is din deraisa, that we say that you can't just break it and fix, and that's it, and fix it. It still needs tahayda b'mikveh. Avol tuma d'Rabbanan lo. When they're talking about the Avodah Zarah, it's not really tuma, but it's a tuma d'Rabbanan that they place upon to distance yourself from Avodah Zarah. So maybe we're not going to be geyser the din of a kli which is broken to fix. Odel meloshna, the tiboile shar tumas d'Rabbanan. So understand, why don't we just learn out just other tumas d'Rabbanan? Why do we have to use this example of the tumah d'Rabbanan of Avodah Zarah? Just use the tumah d'Rabbanan stam of any tumah d'Rabbanan. Says Rashi, could go in kli de metamu mashkin. Let's say a kli that became tummy with liquid, the midaraisa metamu mashkin kli. We know that a liquid cannot be matama a kli midaraisa. Rabbanan goes mishum mashka zava, because the spittle that comes out of a zava's mouth, that is able to be matama. It says here, "Kagoin roikov miragov the avatoma ninhu umatama kli." So a zav, his spittle landing on other mekalim, let's say keli, would make that kli midaraisa tuma make into a rishon, because an av can be matama on the kelim to become a rishon l'tuma, but a stam person's liquid not. But we make a din d'Rabbanan that we say that all liquids can be matama. We can still be matama kelim. So because of that, that's a tumah d'Rabbanan too. So why do we have to use this case of Avodah Zarah? Just stop talk about dinim of tumah d'Rabbanan. Whether we apply this din of if it's broken and fixed, whether it has to be it still has the din of tumah on it. So it's a good point. So v'tiboyle shar tumas d'Rabbanan. So chada migoy chada kim boyle. We're asking like killing two birds with one stone. Tumah d'Rabbanan mi hadra lo hadra. First of all, what's the din by tumah d'Rabbanan? And furthermore, im tim solim lo hadra. Maybe it does not go back, but maybe tumah d'Rabbanan chachavim mishum chumah d'Rabbanan chachavim. When it comes to Avodah Zarah, even though it's also the Rabbanan, but again it's idol worship, so maybe we're more strict specifically when it comes to Avodah Zarah. Mi shama Rabbanan ketuma deraisa lo teku. Okay. Question 10. Boy Rav Hamnuna, ritach kli l'Avodah Zarah b'mal. Let's say it was broken and repaired. Mahut mehim study hasafek chada migoy chada l'maskana. So that gives us a little bit of a understanding. So the question is, do we say that if it's broken and fixed, does we still say that it still retains its tumah midrabanan when it comes to tumas durabanan? Or even if you say it doesn't go back to having tumah when it comes to a tumah durabanan, maybe there's a chumrah when it comes to tumas avodah zarah, and therefore maybe we should equate it to tumah deraisa. Okay, so that we leave off with a teku. Okay. All right. So let's continue now with another question. When it comes to the actual takraivis of Avodah Zarah, however, we're dealing with, let's say, the food that is used in that service. What is the din with that food? So, as we mentioned, an akum could be mavatal, the Avodah Zarah. However, what's the din when it comes to its food? Avati boili kalim. Why are we talking about food? We're talking about kalim, right? You can say ask the same kasha. So kalim wilkim boili. That wouldn't have a question. Why? Kivandi islahu tahara b'mikveh. We know a kli has the capacity, you can be toivel it, and therefore it has the ability to be removed. So tumah nami batla. So therefore we can say that tumah could also be batla. In other words, we find kulais to make a kli become pure. So therefore we'll say that being mavatal a kli also will work. The question is, kikim boile oichlin. When it comes to food, no mikvah purification can take place with that. So therefore, what's the din? So gufa. Why don't we ask about the Avodah Zarah itself? Says Rashi, shel oichlin kegain hamishtachav el pas. Let's say not that you brought bread to an idol, but let's say you actually bowed down to bread, right? So why don't we ask that itself? So avodas kachavim gufa u'meboile. If we're talking about, let's say, worshiping a piece of bread or worshiping a candy bar, I don't know, or something, right? That is not a shaila. As we continue to Beis and Beis, why? Kivandi isura batal, so tumanami batal. So since the isur, you can be mavatal the isur, right? In other words, you could say, I no longer show that this bread has any chashivas, and therefore it's no longer usur, so therefore it's also not going to be tameh. So certainly if you could remove the isur, you can also remove its tumah. Again, the sacrifices that were used with food, what's the din of that food? You can't really remove its isur. Could Rav Gidl, as Rav Gidl said at the beginning of our parak, Rashi quotes, Bishar Tuma, delays beit tahara b'mikvah. When it comes to other things, there's no way of purifying mikvah. The name Kihecha Dishar Tuma Salki Hainami Kol Mesik Minayu. So Tuma Nami Lo Batle. So maybe it also can't remove its Tuma. Well, Dilma Isidaraisa Lo Batle. So when it comes to this food, you can't be Mavatal because it's Isidaraisa. But Tuma Rabbanon Batle Teku. Okay, let's look at TA4. Alright, there's a lot here. TA4. Ha'im Mahani Bittul Oichlin Shehem Akum, O Shehem Takuroivis Akum, Linian Ha'isr Vahatuma. Okay. So if the bread itself is Avodah Zarah, right? If the bread is the Avodah Zarah, then in that case you can be mevatel it, and also obviously also the Tumah. The question is la takroivis. So Inyan Iser Lumahani, we already said it doesn't work. However, in Tumah, that is a question. It says, Dirshu kivan de ein lehem tahara b'mikvah u'me'idach hatuma rak min rabbanan. Okay. So again, if the bread itself is avodah zarah, you can be mevatel and the tumah is removed. However, if it's bread that's brought to an idol, so you can't be mevatel it as far as the isser being removed. But the question is, what is the din of this tumah rabbanan? Okay. Ba'minei Rabbi Yosi ben Shalom Rebbe. Kalim sheshimshu behen bebeis chanya. So now we have another question. You have the kalim that were used in the service in Chanya's place, and who is this? So Rashi helps us out a little bit. A brayso Masechtas Menachos that Chanya was actually the son of Shimon HaTzadik, who's obviously a great man. His son Chanya was a little bit questionable his status. Shibarech l'Mitzrayim. So Shimon HaTzadik's son had no choice but to run away, and he found himself in Egypt. He ran there and he built a mizbech. The question is, when he built an altar in Egypt, what were his intentions? Okay, so what's the status of the kalim from there? Are you allowed, says the Gemara, can those be used in the Beis HaMikdash? This is only in accordance to the question that it's not idol worship. If it's idol worship, of course you're not going to bring it to the Beis HaMikdash. Did not. If you had any Kohanim that actually were known to have worked in that temple in Egypt, Lo Yishamshu b'mikdash b'Yerushalayim. We put a kanas, and we say you're not allowed to serve in Yerushalayim. You're not allowed to anymore do the service. The Einu tzarich loimer l'davar acher, and certainly nothing else. So Kohanim hu dekansin hu rabbanon. So what does that mean? Davar acher. So Rashi says Kohanim sheshimshu avodas kachavim ein tzarich loimer sheshamshu oid l'mikdash. So certainly they can't serve in the mikdash itself, but even the mikdash Yerushalayim. Okay, I'm not sure exactly what that distinction is, but the point is that we made a kanas. Even if it wasn't for Avodah Zarah, we still say the Kohanim shouldn't have done this. So Kohanim hu dekansi rabbanon. So maybe when it came to the Kohanim, we say you Kohanim from Beis Chanya can now work in the Beis HaMikdash. It's just kanas on the person. Mishum de b'nei denin, who they've das, they had free will and they decided to worship to work over there. Of a kalim loy, we're not going to kanas the kalim. Kli is an inanimate object. Odimoloshna. So Malay asurin hain. They're actually going to be aser. Umikra haybiadenu v'shachachnuhu. I had a great pasuk to support this. Unfortunately, it was forgotten. Okay, too bad. Maybe shouldn't even admitted that he knew the pasuk. Okay, look at Rashi. So afagav delab b'nei deinin, we don't care. Even though the kalim don't have das, obviously it's still kanas. Hakanami afagav delab base of chachavim, even though it's not a house of idols. V'lo mystery midaraisa, even though it's not an midaraisa. Kansuhu rabbanan b'kalim kohanim. That we say that the kalim have the same status as the Kohanim. Okay. So Esvei. So Kol Kalim Asher has Niach Hamelech Achaz B'Malchuso B'Maloi. So any of the Kalim, says Rashi, Kohanim Shemimei Chizkiyahu. So there were Kohanim in the time of Chizkiyahu Hamelech. Hayu Magidim Lo, they were told, Kol Kalim Shel Beis HaMikdash, all the Kalim Asher his Niach Achaz B'Malchuso. Basically, anything that Achaz used, you can prepare it and sanctify it. Now, now this is told by Chizkiyahu HaMelech. So we see that clearly there was no gezerah on kalim, because my love, hechinu, prepare these kalim, datvilinhu, hikdishenu, diakdisheninu. Basically, it's telling you that you can take, it's sanctified from the tumas of akum, and you can now go and use it. It says Rashi, Shechazu Moshchum B'Shem Mishcha Alma Kivadim Eray Salon Mechasri Daha Hektish Ninhu Ben Adam Oyser Davish and Shlo. So even though it was Achaz did use it, you can't aser it technically because it's not really his. Inhu Nami will gozer Lihu Hoyel V'la B'nei Dan Inhu. So they're both not a Tumah Deraisa, so therefore we see that you are allowed to use it. So how could we have said that the Kalim cannot be used? There were Geyser Kalim Atu Adam, Atu the Kohanim. Or Malay, Baruch Atol Shemayim Shehechzarti Le Avdati. Fortunately, I told you I forgot the pasuk. Somehow, by being questioned and pushed, I was able to come up with the answer. What is that? The pasuk says Hachenu, which talks about. Let's make sure we have this pasuk. Hachenu shigonzum. Prepare that which I hid it. V'ekdishenu means hide it. V'ekdishenu shehikdishenhu acherim tachtehem. That it should be replaced with other kalim because you cannot use those kalim. So actually, that's the right way of reading it. Not that you could use it, but you need other kalim because these cannot be used because we are geyser. So let's use this as a support, as it's stated in Masechtas Midos, Mazruchis Safinis, the east northeast, Gonzu Beis Chashmonoi es Avni HaMizbeach. The Chashmonoim hid the stones in the Mizbeach, Shishoktu Anshi Yavan, that were destroyed by the Greeks. The Yom Shesha Shishoksu V'Eskachavim. It means that it was used for Avodah Zarah. Says Rashi, Alma Afan Gavdol Hedit Lo Mitzteri Din Adam Asa Davashena Shaloi. As we said before, technically they should not have been able to aser it. Goes Rabbanan Lagabi Gavoya. There was a din to Rabbanan that it becomes aser. The Afan Dalabin Dainin who Ubebeis Chanim Nami. So we should say the same thing. We see clearly that it's a raya that the kalim should become tummy and cannot be used from Beis Chanya to the Beis Hamikdash, just like in the days of the Chashmonaim. So Amar Papa no Hasam Kra Ashkach V'Darsh. That's because they actually found a pasuk to support themselves in Sefer Yecheskel. The pasuk says, "V'hasi boisi ponai mehem." Basically, I turned my face from them. V'chilu es Safuni uvova paritzim v'chiluha. So it's actually not a gezerah, but it's from the Torah itself. It became like their stones in some way. Therefore, that's the reason. It says v'chiluhu, and they desecrated it. Arihechi nevid. So what should we do? Nis Inhu, should we break the stones by the akum? Avanim shleimasam rachmana. They have to be whole stones. So nin surinhu, should we shape the stones and make them smooth? Lo sonif alehim barzel. You can't use metal to cut them. So that's not an option either. So rachmana, yeah, that's what the pasuk says. So why not? Lisparinhu, why don't you break them up, and then you should be able to use it because it takes upon itself the status of chulin, and therefore you can do whatever you want with it. Says Rashi, Shahari chulin hain. So what's the problem? Miloim Rabbi Ishia, didn't he say bikshu lignois kol kesav zahav sheba oilam, that we wanted to be able to technically we should have thrown away all the silver and gold in the world, mishum kasba v'hava shel Yerushalayim, because of the silver and gold in Yerushalayim, because it had so much gold and silver in Yerushalayim, so therefore it should be usher, you can't use it anymore. Davinan ba Yerushalayim havi rubid alma, understand, because of Yerushalayim, that's not the majority of the world. El Omer Abaye bikshu lignois dinri hadaryana turyana, that they wanted to actually maybe close up the Jerusalem old coins. Shiva Mimnei Tiva Shel Yerushalayim Ad Shematzu Lo Mikra Minatayr until we found the pasuk Shehu Mutter. Uva Ba Paritz. Fine. And therefore we saw a pasuk and we understood that it's allowed because it's Chulin. Uva Ba Paritzim V'Chiluha. So what do we see? We see to use these stones apparently could be used for your own purposes. No hasam lo ishtamshu behu legavaya. Over there was not used legavaya. Hacha kivan de ishtamish behu legavaya. Since these stones were used for Hashem, lavarach ara l'shtamush behu hedyaita. They cannot be used l'hedyaita. So in other words, even though you can say, well, what's the problem? You can say, well, what's the problem? Maybe I should still be able to use these stones for chulin, but since it was used for the mikdash, therefore lavarach ara for it to be used. Okay, we're gonna stop there. Maybe we have another question. TA4, we did. TB6. Mahani bitul oichlin shehem akum o shehem takroivus akum inin haiser v'hatoma. So this is the exact same question as TA4 is TB6. Let's see what I wrote. So im oichlin hem avodah Zarah itself az yesh bitul aval takroivus avodah Zarah ma ze boidel ifshita. Finally, more. So that is the boidel ifshita. L'inyan tuma aval l'inyan iser lo yachol avatal l'kuli alma. Ad kan.